Welcome to session 4 of Seed to Supper. You're just entering, we're hanging out and waiting until 6:30, but if you want to talk about things that are happening in the garden, you can do that. So yesterday, I transplanted lettuce starts. I looked at the date. These were starts that in the Giving Garden, that there's a little greenhouse there, and we started them in January. So they were actually pretty big when I transplanted it. And reason I transplanted them yesterday was because Monday and Tuesday were forecast to get down to 28 degrees. And I didn't feel that those soft lettuces that had been inside would do well at 28 degrees. So I brought them in and out, so they could harden off a little bit. I didn't leave them outdoors. Out in the open. I left them kind of under a table, so they were sheltered a little bit from the sun and the cold. And then I planted them yesterday. I should have gone back out there today to check on them to see how they were doing. But yeah, transplanting lettuce in March. It's a thing. We're excited to have spring. Spring solstice is just around the corner. Has anybody else been out in the garden? What have you been doing? Unmute yourself and tell us what you've been doing in the garden.
So I planted my lettuce seeds right in the ground, and beets.
Oh, good. I did plant some arugula.
I've been my chickens out of my my peas.
Oh.
Turns out those are sturdy little plants. They've been uprooted more than once by my chickens, and we keep just tucking them back in there, and I think they're done for. And then the next day they're standing up strong.
Uh-oh.
The big clock. Woo. Yeah, chickens. Wow.
They're not allowed in the garden, but they keep getting over there, little stinkers.
Huh.
I started tomato, pepper, eggplant, and cucumber seeds. I started to start them, and I thought I'd take a little nap, and 4 hours later, I'll do it tomorrow.
Oh. A little nap. Woo.
I just had my vaccination, and like the first one, it made me really sleepy.
Oh, yeah, that's a good excuse.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Keep your body in shape so it can build up that immunity. Yep. So the Master Gardeners, we have new starts in the Philomath High School greenhouse. And this week we did round 1 of tomatoes. So we plant inside in a couple of stages. We're fortunate to be in a greenhouse, so the lighting is very, very good. I've tried growing tomatoes in my own house and have not been as successful because I don't have enough light. But yeah, now is a good time to start tomatoes and basils and peppers if you want to take the leap into starting indoors. But key to success is really to have excellent light and supplemental light beyond just window light. All right. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Sheikah would be proud of me because I am trying to grow tomatoes and peppers for the first time ever. And I made a little rope light seed, warmer to warm the little seed butts. And I have good lights on top. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I know. So then I'll go through too, and you brush them, so you're kind of pretending like it's the wind. Okay, I'm strengthening those stems, and grow, baby, grow. There is something to going out in the garden every day. Who was it that was saying that? Yeah, go out in the morning. Oh, it was Leah. Yeah, go out every morning and check out, not necessarily work, but just to see what's going on. I think it's helpful to be out.
It's a great way to start the morning. especially if you got to go to work or something for the day. Just half a cup of coffee and walk around the yard. It's a good way to start the day.
Yeah, yeah. Plus, if you're going to work, it doesn't make you, it makes you not get dirty and sidetracked, right? It's like, don't touch anything.
No, that doesn't help.
I would worry. I would just forget about going to work and all of a sudden going, woo, what time is it?
So I see in the chat that Rats got somebody seeds. I think it was Rhonda. And that's just funny because I have a really good friend who's been gardening for years. I have complete garden envy of her garden, but she's having kind of a similar problem with mice in her greenhouse, just nibbling on her seeds. So sometimes you just have the bad year and you have to start some more.
Yikes, that's
Luckily
terrible.
this time of year is like still totally fine to start so many things. So
Yeah, you have time.
but it is disappointing.
All right, if you're just joining us, we are going to start in a couple minutes. This is session 4 of Seed to Supper. If you'll look in your chat, you'll see the recipes folder, and there are amazing recipes in there. Take a peek through there. There's many that I'm sure we will want to try. One of the ones I should post in there later was a salad that Sophie Grow gave me. And it's kind of a complicated salad, but man, when you make it, it has butternut squash and feta and honeyed pecans and other things like that. I did put a recipe in there for, this is really basic. This is how to harvest salad greens and make them store well in a refrigerator. So the process I go through of cutting them early, washing them, and one of the benefits of soaking them in water, the biggest benefit is that you'll rehydrate your greens. The next most important benefit is that if there's any slugs or insects on them, they'll crawl to the tops of the leaves that are above water, and they're really easy to get rid of then. But there's also a recipe for an herb vinaigrette in there too. I love making salad dressings. At first, I started out making them only during the summer when I had herbs. And then I dried herbs, and I make my own salad dressing year round now. So it's pretty easy and quick. All right, it is 6:30. We will start our session 4 of Seed to Supper at Home. Thank you for joining us. We have our crew of technical support, presenters, and breakout leaders, some of whom I did not get onto the list, but thank you all, Seed to Supper facilitators, for being here and supporting us. Today's topics is a pretty broad range of topics. We hope to make this real interactive and hear your ideas and plans. So we'll talk about low cost and low impact gardening, gardening in harvest, and looking at your top 10 crops for best value, a little bit on food preservation, and then a good chunk of time and an open Q&A. I know there's a lot of topics that we might not have been able to explore as deeply as you wanted to in the past 3 sessions and today. So if you have questions that don't really fit in with the earlier topics, save them until that open Q&A, and we hope to get to them. As always, please put your questions that you have into the chat bar. We'll start off with Leah and talking about gardening resources.
Microphone. All right, thanks. So today we wanted to have a little bit more of an informal session. We like to wrap up the last day in a more casual way that involves more discussion. So the topic that I am going to talk about is low cost and low impact gardening, gardening resources. And when I was trying to think about how to talk about it, I just figured I would tell you a little story about some of my gardening experiences. Some of the folks here took some time to make some videos, and I'm afraid video making isn't in my skill set, but I thought I'd pull a few pictures out of my photo album to talk about how I approached gardening at times when I didn't necessarily have a lot of money to do it, and I wanted to do it in a way that didn't create a lot of waste. So this is my garden site for my 3rd year of gardening. So my first year of gardening, I had 2 raised beds, each maybe like 3 by 6. That was my first year. My 2nd year of gardening, I had a garden plot in the ground that was maybe 10 feet by 6 feet. And then my 3rd year of gardening, I moved into a new place and that had a big open sunny space, and that was it. And so when we got there, we knew that we had to create some fertile soil, and so we were able to round up some composted manure from a horse farm. And so we were, because when we were thinking, how could we possibly spread an inch of compost over this large garden? We thought, how are we ever going to afford? We can't afford to buy a big pile of compost from one of those places that delivers it. So we were able to get that as a free resource. And then when we were moving out, a neighbor was giving away. They were giving away fence posts and old fencing. So we thought, well, maybe that will work for a fence. But once we spread it out, even though that was like a free resource and we were excited to be able to reuse something that our neighbors were giving away, when we moved in, the first thing we saw were deer lying underneath the window. And we thought, oh no, we're going to need a much taller fence around our garden. Just keeping out the rabbits isn't going to be enough. And when we laid out the fence all the way around the garden, it just wasn't tall enough. It just was only like 5-6 feet tall. It wasn't tall enough. And so at that time, there was a storm that came through and knocked down a whole bunch of trees and branches on a friend's property. So we built arches that came up above the fence and used just like free materials to make the fence taller. We ended up being really happy with it. We ended up feeling like it had more character than it probably would have if we had just actually been able to afford to go to buy the fence posts that were tall enough, or if we were making it solid. So we were pretty happy with that, and we were able to make it out of materials that we were able to find. In fact, next slide. That is not the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Sorry. Well, the next slide disappeared. All right, you can go back to the fence. It happens. So in fact, we ended up being able to use the branches for several other uses. We were able to use the branches for tomato. We were able to, with screws and with branches, we were able to make tomato fences. We were able to make bean towers. And so just out of things that were lying around, we were able to fill in a lot of the gaps that we needed to provide support for our garden as well. So I guess those pictures may have disappeared somewhere. The other slide that I do not see there that I will now tell you about is then when we moved into the next house, we also basically had to start over. And in that house, we didn't know where we were going to start our seeds. And so when we were driving down the road, my husband noticed that there was a little old fiberglass greenhouse that was covered with moss. And he said, that's a really good sign that nobody's using that anymore. And so we went and we talked to the neighbors and said, you know, maybe we could buy this from you. We had no idea what they would say about how much it would cost. And they just said, no, you know what, we're not using it anymore. If you clean it out, you can have it. So although they did, I guess I can say this in this class, they did give us a little bit of a sideways look and wanted to make sure that we weren't doing anything illegal in there, which we swore we were not doing anything illegal. So we were able to get some friends, bring it home, clean it out, and we actually got a lot of useful pots and trays out of it that we were also used to this day. We also, so at the end of the summer, we brought the family a pie, and we also brought them some produce to show them that in fact we had used it for good purposes. All right, now you can go to that slide. So sometimes just asking for things can be a great way to find things. And I wanted, once we were able to grow a whole bunch of starts in that greenhouse, then all of a sudden we had something to share or to trade. And so I know one of my favorite ways to get resources from my garden now is to share when I have extra, and to and then take things from other people who maybe when they have extra. So it's nice when gardening doesn't have to be all about buying things. I mean, I can go to some of the nurseries in town and think of thousands of dollars of things that I want to buy, but for the most part, I don't actually need to, because I wanted to show this picture. These are actually the Egyptian walking onions that Jennifer and I were talking about earlier. Jennifer posted a picture of them, said she had some extra to share, and I came and picked them up. So now I have a tub for them. And then the peppers here are actually peppers that Shiko is giving away, who's also a master gardener on this call. She also, like me, grows peppers and is willing to share when she has more than she needs. I actually got knowledge from her by when she offered these through social media, because she grew a variety called Staten Select, which is a bell pepper variety that does well in cold climates. It's one of my favorite peppers to grow, and she was growing it. So I got the knowledge of where to get the seeds for that particular variety. So sharing can be objects, or it can be plants, or it can be your knowledge of how to grow a particular thing. And I think being part of a community that trades those things is a great way to get what you need without spending money, and also to build community through gardening, which is one of my favorite things about gardening in Corvallis. So next slide. I believe we're able to provide with you in your packet the Corvallis Garden Resource Guide. If you didn't get a copy there, it's also possible to download a PDF of this. So beyond the things that you can scrounge like me, or that you can share and trade, there are also a number of locations around town where you can find many of the things you need for gardening. So this is a great resource if you're new to gardening and you're thinking where to look, where to find things. The Garden Resource Guide is a great place to start when you're trying to find things. Next slide. But I also know that you all, as a group, master gardeners and participants, probably know of a lot of places where garden resources can be found. And so one thing we wanted to do tonight, which is a little bit different, is try to gather all those ideas. So we're going to use a Jamboard, which is a Google document to collect your ideas. This is a test. This is the first time ever using a Jamboard in a Seed to Supper class, so bear with us on the technology. But Candy is putting a link to not just to the Garden Resource Guide in the chat, but we're also going to put the link to the Jamboard, and we're going to collect ideas there. So Jennifer's going to do a bit of magic to show the Jamboard, and then I'll talk about how it works.
Is it there?
Yes. So if you have the kind of computer where you can follow that link and open up the link, then you also are going to be able to add ideas to our board of resources that can be found around Corvallis. There is a sticky note. Oh, someone's showing how to do it. You click on the sticky note, you type in your idea. I'm waiting to see what the first idea. Corvallis Philomath Garden Share on Facebook, right? That's where we were sharing our peppers and our onions. And so I invite everybody to add resources to the Jamboard, and then we'll kind of look and see what's there. If you cannot use the Jamboard, what you can do is type your resources into the chat, and we will, as fast as we can, also add the resources that you're mentioning to the Jamboard. So I see already, I only see the one. So anyone else, you can get started. So this can be for plants, places where you can get plants. This can be places where you get soil. Could be places where you get ingredients that you put into your compost. This can be materials that you could use for garden structures. Let's see, what else might you need for garden? Your favorite seed store, or maybe a place where you trade seeds with people. And I do encourage master gardeners as well as participants to put your ideas up there. This is supposed to be a community edition of ideas. I'm glad to see some nurseries showing up there because it's true. For myself, some of the things that I might spend money on are seeds, and nurseries are some of my favorite places to get seeds. Would any of the master gardeners want to share something that you put on the board while we're waiting for the board to fill up?
I'll go ahead and say one. The Habitat for Humanity, I was able to get a lot of pots. I think it said somewhere on there, you can't get other items if it's available to whatever's there, but a lot of 5-gallon containers, and they had a variety. It depends on what they have at the time, but it's well worth going there, even for some T-posts or whatever, garden supplies, sometimes cages, or sometimes you might be able to reuse for even glass panes. I've seen, people make little warming boxes, cold.
Oh, right. Yeah, because and sorry to call on you if out of turn if you don't want to, but Shika, weren't you giving away a window for to make a cold frame out of?
Yes, I was. and that did get taken, so that was awesome. And I've done that before. And I also have put out, actually, I still have one if anybody wants a tire. Tires make great growing places because they retain heat, like for potatoes. I've used those in the past.
Right. So any of those things might show up at Habitat Store. And I have found these, cheap old fluorescent shop lights, which I find to be very helpful for having extra light if I'm starting seeds indoors. So that's another thing I found at Habitat.
When I have extra things, I post them on Facebook Marketplace and they're gone within minutes.
Yeah, so let's put Facebook Marketplace up on there too if someone has it. Now, Jennifer, are you the one who's organizing the notes over there?
Yeah.
So would you maybe tell us some of the topics that you found since now you have been organizing?
All right. So
I will switch over to the moving things if while you show us what the organization that you created.
Yeah, so there's a couple plant sales that I'm involved in, the Benton County Master Gardener plant sale. The Master Gardeners grow starts over at Philomath High School. We're still working out the details on that, but we hope to have plants for sale, and often they will have orphan plants, meaning they already have enough of, maybe it was Staten Select peppers and they only wanted to sell 4 flats, and there might be some babies that get potted up. And so since you are in the Seed to Supper class and which is part of the Benton County Master Gardeners, we might have some possibility of starts that we might be able to pass on to you. So since you're on the email list for this, if you see anything like that, be sure to respond early. There's a 4-H club that's based at the Giving Garden on the corner of Walnut and Highland, and they will be having a plant sale as well the first Saturday in May. Again, the details are still being worked out on that.
I just learned about this Sweet Home Propagation Fair.
Oh,
did you see this? That
yeah.
has seeds and tree starts. I've never been there. I might have
I haven't
to
either.
Sweet Home. Diana, did you add that?
No, I didn't. Somebody else did.
I added that one. I don't know if they're having it this year, but normally they have the plants, the tree starts for like $1 or $2 a tree start, and they will treat the plant for you. They have tables of plants, and I mean like 5 or 6 6 foot long or more, that they have all the tree plants starts into. And they also have a lot of different seeds that they will just have to trade for people.
Cool. And I see that somebody put save seeds from open pollinated varieties. So I'm hoping that maybe this summer, if this garden class has some follow-up workshops, I put a pitch into having a whole follow-up workshop on seed saving, because it's a little beyond what we've been able to talk about in this class, but it's a great topic.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So we'll put that in the chat when we get there at the end. So if you guys have ideas on that follow-up. So I actually have, that reminds me, I'm going to have to find them. Last year I saved a bunch of the scarlet runner beans. They look like Jack and the Beanstalk magic beans. There's these big dark bean seeds with little spots on them. So I'll try to package them up in little things later, because it's a warm season crop. But if anybody, and you definitely have to trellis them to get 6 feet tall, and they make lovely, lovely tender beans that you can eat for quite a long time. And then when they get older and bigger, you let them dry. I didn't ever eat them dry. I ended up saving them. But yeah, the hummingbirds like them too. So if you want to attract wildlife into your garden, it's kind of a dual purpose bean. You can eat them and you can feed the birds too.
I absolutely agree. So anyways, thank you all for participating in our Jamboard experiment, and we will keep this, we will make sure that if this is not in your resource folder, we'll make sure that this doc moves to the resource folder. And thank you for contributing your ideas. I learned some things. So.
Fun. Okay, so you will save that one, Leah. I stop share, right?
I will, and
okay.
Yeah, you can stop share. And I think we're making a topic shift, and we're gonna stop for a minute thinking about growing and caring for our garden, and we're gonna start thinking about the end of the season.
Oh, we jumped straight into a poll. I forgot. Frank, are you running the poll here?
Yes, sorry, I had to unmute here. I'll go ahead and launch the first question. This is just for students. A reminder, if you're a master gardener, allow the students to reply. So the first question is, how do you plan to use your local produce? And you can select more than one answer. All right, if you have an answer, go ahead and do that now. I'm going to end it here in a few seconds. All right. Now I'm going to share the results. So it looks like fresh eating is the way to go. That's the best way, more nutrients that way. But if you've got extra, there's a lot of other ways, and you'll hear more about that here before too long. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question. All right, next question is, what issues have you encountered at harvest time? All right, we're going to go ahead and end here in a couple seconds. All right, so looks like most people aren't really sure, trying to find out when the right time to harvest is. I think we're going to talk maybe a little bit about that here before too long. All right, that's the end of the poll. Thanks for your participating.
All right, Candy will talk to us about using our bounty and more. Oh, no, Cynthia, sorry, not Candy. Candy's our chat moderator. I'm getting my people mixed up. Cynthia, take it away.
That's okay. Welcome, you guys. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about gardening, first of all, and then about harvesting and some specifics about each crop. So we'll start with our gardening, promoting our health. I think it's a good time for us to remember all the positive things that happen with gardening. We spent a lot of time talking about planting and waiting anxiously for those seeds to come up and things to start growing, and then we're going to harvest. But in the meantime, we have a lot of things that happen with gardening that are really positive for our lifestyles. So go ahead, Jennifer, next slide. So if we look at this slide that you guys can read, but I think it's interesting that one of the first things that's listed on there is stress release. And it is amazing. I think right before we started the official session, we were talking about getting out in the garden and what that does to your mental health and how that promotes positiveness in starting your day. It does actually, from a medical standpoint, decrease your cortisol and increase your other endorphins. So it makes it really a nice thing to do. It's a good workout. If you're out in the garden, is the same as an hour in the gym. So I think we can all think about that when the pandemic has caused a lot of people not to be out in their gym. It helps us eat healthy food, and it also helps for brain health. So we have a lot of good things, healthy benefits for gardening besides the produce that we have created. So go ahead, Jem. I think I enjoyed this slide. You can read it, but I think those are good pictures of making gardening a family event. Children are amazing in their awe and wonder of gardening, and the opportunities that they have to get out into the fresh air, the opportunities for patience and watching things grow. I had a friend who said their row of carrots never got beyond 1/4 of an inch because every time the kids went out in the garden, they wanted to pick a carrot, and they were like only 6 carrots left by the time the season was over. So they have, it just does a lot for just being out in the sunshine and watching things grow and learning patience. So it's just a fun thing for them to be able to experience. Go ahead. All right. Again, we'll talk a lot about nutrition. Carol's going to talk about preserving, but we're going to talk about the question that you people had about when is it ready for my harvest to be picked, and knowing that when we have a garden space and when we're picking crops, they're at the peak, they're better nutrition wise and that have better flavor in them. So we're going to talk about what we can do to keep that going for the whole gardening season. Okay. All right. If you guys would look at your books, you will see in the back, I'm going to tell you, starting on page 128, there are recipes that are listed in that book for cooking things from your garden. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's a good start in the back of your book. And next slide. We also talk about beyond these recipes that are here, and there's some pretty basic and useful recipes for the stuff that we commonly grow in our garden. And next slide. If you look to, there is a website that you can go, it's an extension, OSU extension site called Food Hero, and it has a list of recipes based on main ingredients and a lot of just good information for nutrition and simple recipes that you can do with your garden produce. So that's another option that you have, and that is a free download, a free site to go to. And the next slide. This is also a free download, and that is in your book, in your resource pages, but it is a wealth of information on recipes that are good to eat and inexpensive to produce. So that's another resource that we have for cooking our produce. So, okay.
So Cynthia, before you go on, I forgot to make a slide for the homework recipe folder, and I noticed a lot of recipes in there. There was a tabbouleh recipe that looked awesome with carrots and parsley, and not carrots, cucumbers and parsley and all kinds of stuff. So I think the participants and master gardeners have put in a cool mix of recipes. Check them out.
So we can, yeah, so definitely. It sounded like there was a great wealth of information. As Leah said, going to be cooking from that folder for quite a while. So, okay. Okay. So harvesting for freshness to get the best flavor and the highest nutritional value, we have to harvest best only to harvest what you need at the time. Extras should be stored in a cool place. Mornings or evenings are best. When the sun is out, things tend to wilt and they don't do as well in preserving them if you're not going to use them right away. I found this interesting. It says, do not bruise the produce, which is really true. And I was thinking about children being in the garden, and sometimes that's just something that we're going to have to deal with, because that's part of the experience and the experiment. When we have a mushed tomato and not everything comes into the kitchen in perfect condition, but it is the best idea to hand pick and not squish things down in your buckets so that we can get the best out of it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about harvesting and how we know things are ready when we talk about individual produce and gardens harvest. So we'll go on from there. Okay. All right. In your book, and it talks about come and cut again harvest method. So this is where you cut the older excuse me. You cut the older leaves off of your produce And then you let the younger leaves grow bigger so you can do it again. So basically you have an increase in harvest because you are not pulling up your whole plant. So this works well for spinach and chards and kale, and also for broccoli, and we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. But it extends your life of your plant when you do this method. Okay. All right. So on page 107 is, it's okay. You're Jennifer, you're okay. Is this crop by crop guide. So if you look at it on 107, you will see that it lists alphabetically 30 crops. We're not going to go through all of those crops, but we're going to pick out some to talk about today. But it will talk about when to harvest, use and storage, and the nutritional value. So it's really a very succinct resource for you to use when you're looking for what's happening. Okay. And those are the 30 crops that are listed in there. Okay. So we're going to talk about the top 10 crops for best value. And if you will notice, the first thing that I have listed here are herbs. I thought this is a really good slide because it tells you, look at that little bunch of mint, $1 a bunch, lemon balm, basil, all of those things. If you've ever grown an herb and you've had success with it, you will know that you have a season long, many dollars worth of herbs in there. So that's one of the first things that is the best value for growing when we have the space for doing that. Okay. Basil is the first thing that we're going to talk about. If you look at that, the harvest season goes. I just planted my basil inside in the sun, in the sunny south window, and to get it out to transplant later on in the season after it grows up. So harvesting is from July to September. So if you look at that little slide on the side, you have leaves that are 3 to 6 inches. You can have purple basil, you can have green basil. Harvesting from the top, you take a few leaves at a time. It encourages growth. If it flowers, we need to pick those flowers off so the leaves will continue, and the flowers, it'll go to seed and you won't have any more crop there. So when you pick it, if you're not going to use it right away, it can be stored. I put mine in an airtight bag in the refrigerator. People say that you can do it in a cup of water. I have not done that. You can use it if you have a big crop that you're doing, then you blend it with veggie oil, and then you can put it in the freezer, and then you can use it all through the winter season. I think, Jennifer, when you talked about your salad dressing, this just reminded me it's perfect to have it fresh, and then it's also good to have it frozen and use it during the winter. So those are one of the good things that we can do with basil. It's a very other than using it in a vinegar salad dressing, it can go into your frozen, can go into your tomato sauce in the winter. It can go into a lot of things. I have basil right now that I'm using, and it can go into a lot of things. It makes it in cooking and fresh and salads. So it's very, very tasty.
So one advantage of basil when you cut it and save it in a cup of water just on the kitchen counter, sometimes, a lot of times, if it's there long enough, it will send out roots. So if you want to expand your basil, or if you have a plant that might be getting a little bit woody and it's not at its peak, take some side shoots and start some new ones so that you can extend your season. You might put it in a container so that if you know it's going to drop down cold at night, then you can move it inside and extend your harvest even further.
Mm-hmm. The next slide shows one of my favorite things to do with basil is to make pesto. So, Cheryl says it smells really good. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So and pesto can be frozen. So if you make it in the season when you're having your harvest, then you can freeze it and use it all winter long. So I think those are advantages to do that. Okay. Cucumbers. Your plants go out, and depending on the kind of cucumber that you can have slicing, you can have pickling, you can have yellow cucumbers, lemon cucumbers. So there's a variety of cucumbers out there that you can have. So based on that, the harvest is based on your preference of the cucumber that you've picked. Slicing 6 to 8 inches, pickling anywhere from 2 to 6 inches. So depending on what you're going to do with them. I did notice that some people were going to do some pickling, so maybe that's one of those things that you'll end up doing. Again, harvesting in the morning is the best. And then maybe I'm the only one who's had this experience, but going out to your cucumber bed and finding a cucumber that's now 12 inches long and 8 inches in diameter, and it's like, that is not going to do for anything. So, and starting to get yellow. So they start growing and they grow really fast. So daily looking at that is a good way not to have overgrown cucumbers. So they will store for quite a while in the refrigerator. So if you see on the side with your clippers, you want to clip a little bit with the stem on it, and that seems to make things a little bit better for processing them.
A little master food preserver trick is if you slice 1/8 of an inch off of the blossom end when you store it, the enzymes do not ripen quite as quickly.
Ah,
Really?
okay. I have also done, and this was something that I read a long time ago, way before I was a master gardener, but in organic gardening, where your overripe cucumbers, if you slice off the end when you're going to use it and you rub it, you get some of that bitterness goes away, goes out of the cucumber. So you can save it a little bit. So, I mean, if it's huge, you're not going to save it, but so I think that's, yeah, we can do that. I didn't know that, Diane, so that's good information too. So, okay. And beans, snap beans. These are not Jennifer's 7 feet tall beans, but they are prolific in growing. So they also can get overgrown if you're not watching them, but they will do harvest from July to September. And you have to look at them. You want them to be picked before the pod. You can really see the bean in the pod. So they'll be the most tender then. These are ones that the kids in particular like to pick off, and sometimes you have to watch them so that they're not pulling up your plants at the same time they're pulling off their beans. But so if you harvest them, they will continue to blossom and they will continue to grow. So that's one of those things that keeps going, and they will keep for quite a while in your storage, and they are pretty easy to freeze. So not a lot of work to do that, and they taste pretty good in the winter. So I have had mixed luck with doing saving my pods when they dry. It seems, for me anyway, it has always seemed like a lot of work for the little bit of amount that I get, but you definitely can do that. So you can use them and use them as dried beans. So, okay. Broccoli. Broccoli plants start in June, and they can go as far into the late fall as we want if we take good care of them. When we cut off the main broccoli plant, we should do that when it's tight and compact here. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. When it's there, before the flowers, you get yellow flowers. You can still harvest it when it's that, but that's not at its prime. So we want to do it before it gets yellow flowers on it, and we'll harvest that. And those side shoots that you see right there will keep growing. So you just cut them off and you'll get more. And you can have broccoli till the late fall when you do that. So it'll just keep going. My broccoli last year, after I picked my main head, I had broccoli until the end of October. So it was really kind of fun. It's always nice to have fresh things when everything else is kind of waning down. So yeah, so I think we're okay with that. carrots. There's our little child that's picking her carrots. So they also will go from the start of July into November. They get sweeter as they grow. So there's a variability there. So we don't want them to get huge, so they get too big and split. But they will they can be picked and stored with their tops off. I've actually left my carrots in the garden through November and dig them up when you want a few fresh carrots, and there is nothing to me any tastier than a fresh carrot out of the garden. So those will, I think, when you just have to make sure that when you're harvesting them that you loosen that soil so that you can get the whole entire carrot up and not break off part of it. So those are another thing that will last you a long time. Okay. Chard. Chard is one of those cut and come again. I don't know if there's a lot of experience out there with that, but chard is one of those wonderful things that can be used as a fresh green, steamed, broiled, used in soups, salads. It's very, very versatile, and it will last a long time in your garden if we do this cut and come again growing. So, go ahead, Jen.
So I have kale that was planted, I think in September last fall, and I still am cutting off of it. So eventually it will go to seed, but that's a good long time to be able to harvest. We had a pretty mild winter, so it stayed all winter, and I use it in winter salads and soups like, and it's gorgeous. Look at those colors. It makes a salad just come alive. I love chard. It's very mild tasting. It looks like it's going to be beefy and crazy, but it's very mild. So it's in the same family as spinach. A lot of nutrients. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's got good color to it. So
yeah.
And collard greens are something that I have not grown, but again, the cut and come again. If you look at that bottom picture, it will tell you that when it gets bigger, you want to cut off that stem, and you can use those greens in a variety of ways. Again, the same as you would chard. So again, look at your harvest season goes till December. So when everything else is like rainy and cold and nothing's green, chard is right. Collard greens are right there for you, so that we can have something that livens up your table. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't remember what class I was talking about. If I said this already, I'll say it again. So as you see here, they're cutting out the middle rib of the collard greens. I'm still harvesting collard greens again that were harvested or planted last fall. So they can go much longer if you have a mild winter. But if you're saving those scraps and freezing them, you can make an awesome vegetable broth. And in the recipe folder, I hope I put that in there. I think that was the first thing I put in there. So making vegetable broth from free scraps, talk about resourceful. And it has really taken my soup making up a notch because the broths are so rich, because there's probably scraps of 20 different varieties of vegetables in there, just because I put peels, potato peels, ribs from the collards, ribs from the kale, ends of onions, anything in there, and it's amazing. It gives all your soups kind of a greenish tinge, like if you're making chicken noodles, the noodles will turn greenish, but it tastes awesome.
Okay, all right, and kale, probably my favorite of the green category. I just picked, just like you, Jennifer, my kale I planted in the summer, and it actually didn't do the best that I thought. I left it. It was just kind of not great, and I have been picking kale for the last month now from this crop. It's just expounded in this weather. It's just done really well. Tonight I made bean and kale and cheese quesadillas.
Wow.
So yeah, so And all I did was take off the stem like they're showing you here, and then I chopped it up, and I have another recipe tomorrow that I'm using with chicken and kale. So it's kind of fun to have something that's, so this, mine is, I have two varieties. Mine was the green curly, and then I have some purple. So it's just kind of fun to have both of those in the garden space and using that up. So I really want to try the broth that you talked about, Jennifer, but I have a worm farm, and so all of my stems and everything go ground up into my worm. So
No, but you can still give, so after I make the veggie broth, I still dump all the random ends and stuff, and it goes into my compost. So, the worms will just get it when
well, that's true. I could do that. That's true.
one step further down.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay. We're just about, and lettuce is the same thing. I think we'll see how your little baby lettuces go, Jennifer.
Yeah.
But it's a cool crop, and it enjoys cool weather. It's, again, this is leaf lettuce, and so it's a cut and come again crop. I think what I will say about this is that when you're planting leaf lettuce, you want to do succession planting so that you can have plant your original lettuce, 2 weeks later, plant more lettuce, so you have a continuation of your crop. It will bolt in really warm weather, hot weather, and that bottom picture shows the bolting when it goes to seed. So you can, you can cut that off, but your lettuce will get bitter if you let it go to seed. So again, cutting that off. I am not a great head lettuce grower, but that's a little bit different. You just have to, harvest that when the head gets big enough and clip it off, and it's a one plant deal. So, but lettuce will store for a long time, and 2 to 3 weeks in your refrigerator in a bag. So it's a good crop. Okay. Peppers, all kinds of peppers. These are hot peppers that they're growing. Then they, I think your book or somewhere where I read when I was researching this, that hot peppers are easier to grow than bell peppers. So depending on what you want to do with your peppers, making hot sauce or having bell peppers, you just pick your variety, and then you're looking at your bell peppers that are, harvest them when they're green, or you wait till they turn red. That was a new awakening for me when the first time my green peppers started turning red, and I went, oh my goodness, I just never waited long enough for them. So there we go. And then I guess the twist and turn, so we're not injuring the plant when we do that. And again, they will stay in the refrigerator. You can freeze peppers. That's pretty easy to do for later on in the use. Okay, I think we have one more. Oh, spinach again. Cut and come again does the same thing as our other greens. I talked about the 10 top things. I actually have 13 here, because the greens kind of all come together. So you can do baby spinach, or you can wait till it gets a little bit bigger. And harvesting that out will give you a long-lasting crop. So we'll again store in the refrigerator for a while after you wash it and leave it in there. So okay. Ow, summer squash. It always is the joke around when whether you're having yellow or green zucchini squash. How many plants of zucchini do you need? Not too many, but you're always afraid you're not going to get the seeds to come up, so you have many more than you need. But there's a lot of things that you can do with. You can harvest them when they're really tiny, or they can get to be a little bit bigger. You can use them as zucchini boats to stuff and do that. Last year, when I had an overabundance of zucchini, I put it in my dryer. I grated it up, put it in my dryer, and then I put it in the food processor, and then I use it for soups and stews and thickening. So it works really well for that. And there's a lot of recipes out there that we can do. So depending on what you want to do, zucchini can be small. I have to tell you, when I grow my zucchini, I never knew that they could be that tiny. So mine were always bigger than that. So yeah. So again, if you decide to keep them, they'll stay in the refrigerator for a while, and then you can harvest them and preserve them up in a variety of ways. Okay, and last, tomatoes. If you look at that first thing, there are 4,000 varieties of tomatoes in the world. So there's a lot, there's a lot out there. I do have to say that when the first tomatoes come off your plant, it's the wonder that you never buy a tomato in the store, because it's just amazing what that will do for you. And it is very, 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 very rewarding to have your first harvest of your tomatoes. So firm, just a little bit of give on there. You're going to twist off the vine and should come off easily when you do that. I did last year when I was talking about storage, they will stay in your refrigerator. Last year when I harvested my tomatoes, I still had a lot of green ones. And this is the first time that this has really worked for me, but I put them in a paper bag and with an apple, supposed to, and the apple makes the ethylene and makes it ripen the tomatoes. And I had probably a dozen tomatoes because I just tried it as an experiment, and they all ripened and they were delicious. In the past, I've had them just kind of just, you know, like rot, and they don't turn red. So yeah, so that was a good experiment for things that are, as the season goes and we know we're going to get our first frost and our tomatoes are going to die. So yeah, so that's about it for that. And then this is just my gazpacho recipe, which I did not put in the folder, but it just reminded me that all the things that we talked about go into this cold tomato soup, basically. So it just gives us a little bit of something that we can do with all the produce that we get, mostly at the same time. And I liked it because of the basil, because I always have lots of basil, so it's always good to do that. So I think that's the end of my section. Are there questions?
So do we want to perhaps have Carol give her
Sure.
presentation, and then we'll lump all the questions?
Yeah, that sounds good.
The Q&A.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Cynthia. It makes me want to harvest stuff. It's so exciting. Carol is our dual master gardener and master food preserver, as well as food hero, liaison worker, amazing person. So Carol, take us away.
That's true. I'm Carol, and I'm a master gardener, and I also participate in the OSU Extension Master Food Preserver Program, as does Diane. So
okay.
I'm glad that she's here and she can keep me honest. So we wanted to keep your thoughts stimulated related to preserving some garden produce, and lead you towards some helpful resources when you get to that point of the year. Next slide. So whether you're preserving your own harvest or you've gathered locally grown fruits or vegetables, the 4 methods of food preserving, canning, actually there's 2 types of canning, you know, boiling water and pressure canning, but canning, freezing, pickling, and drying make it possible to serve foods that taste harvest fresh at a later date. Next. So food preservation really is a science, and that allows us to keep foods beyond their usual spoilage time, and also provides possibilities for being creative and artistic. The thing is, though, that the tested guidelines are there. The science part of it keeps us safe, related to making sure that heat penetrates to the center of a jar that you're canning, so that microorganisms are not able to grow. The science might also be related to monitoring pH of products when they're produced a particular way with a particular type of vinegar. Might also be monitoring nutrient retention so that you get the most nutrition value from the food preservation. So the tested guidelines that we speak of relate to providing the best quality, and that would mean keeping the best color and the best texture and the most flavor. The guidelines might be related to the best nutrient value, again, doing things in a particular way so that you do keep as many nutrients as possible. And then probably the part that people are most concerned about are the guidelines that protect us from foodborne illness to again, have our foods as safe as possible. Next. So in the participant folder, there's a list of food preservation resources for you. There's a link to the OSU Extension food preservation area. You can find there lots of online publications for drying and canning and freezing. And there are some of them that are also in Spanish. There is a link towards the Master Food Preserver program. If you'd like to learn more about that, it's very similar to Master Gardener, where you get some very wonderful training. Unfortunately, that training hasn't been able to happen the last couple of years in person, so we're getting lots of Zoom training these days, but it's a very nice program and you learn a lot, and then you're able to go out in the community and help with other programs so that people can share all this food preservation knowledge. You can follow the Master Food Preservers on Facebook, and that very first graphic is the logo for the state food preservation Facebook. And then Linn-Benton County also has a Facebook account as well. So, and there are food preservers who are sharing information via Facebook, since we haven't been able to have the in-person classes like usual. So it's a great place to go and ask questions or to see videos and such. There's also a canning timer and checklist app, and the middle graphic is the logo for that app. And it's a very nice way to avoid making mistakes with food preservation. So if you go in and say that you want to preserve green beans, for example, it will only give you the directions for safe ways of doing green beans. So there's no way to boiling water bath green beans, because that would be a surefire way to kill everybody in your family. So it's very nice. And then you can press the timer and it keeps track of times for you and such. Very, very nice. There's a link to the National Center for Home Food Preservation, where the majority of the research that's done, like I mentioned, pH and internal temperatures and such, and then they share that with places, other state extension programs. And there's a link to ball preserving. That would be that is the private company that does food preservation testing. So you can feel comfortable with any of the recipes that are on the ball website. They also have answers to common questions, such as, how can I tell if the recipe that my grandmother gave me is safe, and other similar things. They have recipes, and the nice thing about Ball is that they have the resources to do a little bit more of the artistic kinds of recipes that are also safe, versus the kinds of things that you might do in your own kitchen thinking that it's safe, but you don't really know if it's safe or not. They have some very nice instructional videos, and you might be familiar with the Ball Blue Book of Preserving, and that would be a book that's around quite often, easy to find in bookstores and such. With most with that particular food preservation book which would be the other one that I would guide you towards, would be to look for ones that are current, that are more modern, versus a vintage one, because things have changed. Next. So this is a perfect time to start planning for preserving. Think about preserving while you're making your garden decisions. There may be some types of vegetable herbs that you want to grow because they are part of your preserving plans. You might want to pick particular varieties to grow because of their ease of preserving. For example, Roma tomatoes are particularly good for a tomato sauce to freeze. It's not the only, obviously you can freeze or can all tomatoes, but they're particularly good because they're less watery and you don't have to cook them down quite as much. You might want to grow tomatoes that are particularly good at drying. That's just one example of how you might choose a variety related to preservation. And then if you know the produce that you can get out of a plant. It might help you know how many plants to grow in order to preserve what you want to last a particular amount of time. So those are some thoughts you might have. And then the other thing to think ahead about is just gathering the tools and supplies that you might need. There are, like other hobbies, there's lots of possible tools. And in the spirit of Leah's talk earlier, you might be able to borrow canners from neighbors or share with neighbors and have maybe this summer we'll be able to have preservation parties again. But there are various things that you can do to gather these things and not have them be terribly expensive. Start looking for dehydrators on sale or at thrift stores, etc. Next.
Our canning jars at estate sales.
Yeah,
we can
canning
have,
jars.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
the canning jars were in short supply. The lid things were in short supply last year.
They were.
Woo!
Actually, let me say something about that. Do make sure that when you do buy lids, that you know where they're coming from. Apparently last year, Diane, you can correct me if I need some correcting, but apparently there were some online when they were really in short supply from like Ball and Kerr. You could buy some unbranded canning lids online, but apparently they were very poor at sealing. So it was somewhat of a waste of resources because you might can something and then the seal wouldn't stay. So it's a reason to be sure about what you're purchasing, but that's a whole nother talk. So I will stop here and just hope that you have wonderful gardening and preserving season coming up.
Thank you so much, Carol. So we're going to go into a general Q&A session. So this is your opportunity to maybe ask more questions if we didn't get to things in the chat in the past 4 sessions, or you just wanted some comments. We have a lot of master gardeners on tonight, so if you have any questions, you can throw your trickiest things out there, because we might have somebody who has had experience or has done research on that. So type your questions into the chat, and we'll do that. We have, who's our chat person? Candy.
They've all been answered so far. So I need some new questions.
Yeah, and I'd welcome people to even give us your hard questions. So sometimes when you sit in on a class, you maybe like you hear something, you think like, that doesn't match up with my experience. So we welcome you to like ask your hard questions. Like, you said this, but I noticed this different thing in my garden. So feel free to give us the hard one.
Wow. What do you think about composting garden beds? Anyone?
It looks like there's more on that one. Maybe if you read the whole question,
Okay.
the number 2, it would give some context.
My yard is in bad condition, bumpy, lots of weeds, clay soil, unknown plants. I was suggested that I should start a new lawn. I would like to transform my yard to an edible garden for humans and grow native plants for birds and pollinators. However, I cannot afford to hire someone to do that. I also want to get involved. Is there an organization or group that could help me? Is there a tool share organization for tools that we do not use often? Let's go with that. Let's go with those.
This is Lynn. In answer to the first question about composting garden beds, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are you talking where you begin your garden by putting, branches and rough stuff at the bottom and then leaves? And is that the kind of composting garden you're speaking of?
So I see garden beds that you could, so there's like a space in the bed that you could put your food waste in there and it will turn to compost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I could send you a link from Costco here, for example, something like that. So I'm not sure it's a good idea or it's a bad idea or it's
So-
just okay.
So I have done kind of a composting bed. It was more like, I don't remember who talked about making new, oh, Cheryl talked about making new beds, and you make them in layers and stuff. And I haven't used this big keyhole size. I've done more like layering ones. And then I've also done like dig a hole in my garden and put a flag where that compost was that I put. So then I know not to plant anything in there immediately, but then after a month or two, I can be pretty assured that most of that stuff is decomposed, so I can go ahead and plant either seeds or starts nearby, and they can grow. So I think it's a good strategy, especially if you are dealing with a lot of soil that needs to be conditioned, especially if you can get your brown and green materials on the cheap and be able to do big areas and improve your soil a chunk at a time.
Thank you. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So because I already have a garden bed and I'm thinking about putting a basket in there at the center. So
Yeah.
I could put like waste in there.
Yeah, you don't even need to put a basket. You could just dig a hole. You don't have to get
Okay.
fancy about it. I just dug a hole before. You just don't want to fall in there, you know? So a basket with a lid that's buried and a basket that has open edges would be okay, but you really don't need to use anything. You can just make a hole.
Okay.
Okay.
Talk about question 4 there about saving seeds for next year, since I talked about seeds, but a lot of seeds you can save for the next year, but seeds vary in how long they will last. For example, parsnips, onions are good for 1 year. That's when they germinate the best. And
Okay.
I've learned that from experience. I planted parsnips, they didn't come up. Planted them again, they didn't come up. Planted them again, they didn't come up. And finally, a friend said, well, you used this year's seeds, didn't you? Well, no. And they just didn't germinate. So there are resources, and I put a link in the resources for a seed viability chart that tells you how long seeds for various vegetables will last. Some of them last up to 5 years. So it really depends on the kind of vegetable you're talking about. But definitely you can save seeds in general.
If you're talking about saving seeds from the plants, like the plants make
Yes.
their own seeds, then it depends on the plant, because some plants get their pollen from the exact same plant. So tomatoes, when you grow a tomato, most of the time that tomato plant is providing pollen from the same flower. And so when you save seeds from a tomato, it's going to be, the plant is going to be the same variety, especially if you look on your seed packet and it says open pollinated. So you want to look for your seed packet to say open pollinated, and then you can probably save the seeds. I would research how to do it. It's a long topic, but other plants, they get the pollen from somewhere else. So maybe your pumpkin is actually the same close enough genetically to your zucchini, and they make a seed, and you don't know what kind of squash it's going to grow. So you can't save every seed from every kind of plant. It's really something that you have to learn over time.
Okay. The reason I asked that question, because last weekend I went to a shop to buy some seed packages, and then some packages I saw like it said F1.
Right.
So I'm thinking, if it's F1, then if I save seeds from this year and grow again next year, the quality probably will not be consistent.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. There's some other comments in. How do I drop the phosphorus in my soil? Anybody know the answer to that question?
I don't. That's a good question. So if we don't know the answers, if you've stumped the master gardeners, we'll pass these on and get them answered because we have a wide variety of panelists. So we'll keep moving along and you will get answers eventually. We'll put them into an email and we'll also post them in the participants guide, but we'll definitely follow up on these.
Okay, there was lots of comments, but also responses on tool libraries. So I will skip that one. What do I do about root maggots on cabbage and other vegetables?
I find that the most effective way to avoid them is to cover my crop with a light material, a row cover, before the little white butterflies are flying around in June, because those little white moths or butterflies are laying the eggs that become the root maggots. So if you can keep your broccoli and cabbage and other crops covered while they're in flight, they won't be laying their eggs on your crops.
Okay, thank you. Is there such a thing as too many millipedes and centipedes?
I don't think so. Remember we did the good bug, bad bug thing, right? And millipedes and centipedes are really involved in the composting process, and you find them in compost a lot. So even though they seem kind of creepy crawly, I mean, I've never seen crazy numbers, but I don't know of any research that says you can have too many unless somebody knows of them damaging plants in particular. Along with that, on that same line, you know, if I'm making my own compost and turn over and find mealworms or soldier fly pupae, is this because of something wrong I did? No, that is a really awesome sign, right? If there's worms and larvae and things growing in there, they're chomping down that compost, and they are helping the whole decomposition process. And they'll hatch out and fly away and be gone, and the compost will continue to decompose. You will see, you know, remnants of, I don't know anyway, remnants of them, but they're not there alive anymore, like skeletons, exoskeletons, right? Pieces of them. But yeah, they'll compost down as well. So I think it's a good sign.
Okay.
Compost living.
Someone had problems with strawberries, a gray mold issue with the strawberries. So they moved them, put them in an elevated rows, and are hoping more for more success. Sprayed them with copper. Any idea on the odds of success? And is there a possibility that the disease could spread around the strawberries or even to other plants?
So the other day, on Monday, so the Benton County Master Gardeners sponsor monthly meetings that bring in experts, and the expert from OSU that spoke was Bernadine Strick, and she spoke on Monday about blueberries and raspberries. However, I think there's also an OSU extension publication on strawberries, so we'll be sure to put that in our responses about that. Does anybody have any specific information on gray mold? Okay, we'll research that. Thank you, Jenny.
What is the deal with blood meal and bone meal? Why do YouTube video gardeners love those so much? Can anybody tell us the benefits of blood meal and bone meal?
Well, blood meal is very high in nitrogen. So it's kind of like the organic fertilizer that you have to be very careful with. So for example, when I grow peppers, I might take a bag of blood meal and just sprinkle like 1 teaspoon around the base of my already growing pepper plant. But it is a strong fertilizer, and you can actually kill your plants with it. It can actually burn your plants. So it's a power, maybe people love it because it's powerful, but it's also a little bit dangerous. So that is blood meal. I think bone meal is a source of phosphorus, if I'm not it's a
phosphorus, and it has a little bit of calcium in it, which is good for tomatoes. Sometimes tomatoes develop blossom end rot. The ends just turn brown, yucky. And sometimes, not always, sometimes it's an issue with watering, but sometimes it's due to a lack of calcium. And so bone meal is a source of phosphorus and has some calcium in it as well.
Okay. So I think that is all of the questions.
All right. What happened to my screen share? Something got crazy here. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
The slides. Okay.
Yes.
So we have a poll. You guys, I was so excited about all these questions. I failed on my job as timekeeper. It is 8 o'clock straight up. But we have two really important things. So I encourage you to stay on and answer the poll about follow-up activities. And we have a survey, and we'll put the link in there. And the survey is only 12, fill in the bubble, click on the dots survey. So please stay on after this poll. It's only 2 questions to answer the survey. And this helps us in our planning and seeing what kind of results that you guys might have experienced. And also, please put in the chat after this poll if there's other activities or other topics that you want to hear more about in either a virtual format or live, if we're able to go live later in the season, what kind of things you would want to hear about. So Frank, do you have that poll, or Judith?
I sure do. I'll go ahead and launch it right now. So what follow-up gardening activities would you be interested in? And you can choose as many as you'd like. Another couple seconds here, and okay, it looks like we got a couple more. Great. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end this one and share it. Looks like workshops, open Q&A, great. All right, we're gonna move on to the next one. Okay, last poll question. What topics would you be interested in learning about? So again, these are all potential follow-on training that we might be able to put together for you. So if there's certain areas that you would like some more assistance on, please note them here in this poll. Thank you.
For the chat, it sounds like we can only choose one.
So if we do save the chat, so if you're only allowed to pick one, but you really want to tell us that there are others you're interested in, if you want to make a note of that in the chat, then we will have those records and we can go back there and look as well. So I guess right now you'll have to pick your top one, but it's hard. I'm glad to hear people are interested in more than one.
Thanks for that feedback. All right, we'll go ahead and stop it.
Okay.
Initial results.
All right, fall and winter gardening for sure. So definitely that topic came out in a breakout session yesterday. So that will be our top one we'll look at. All right, so closing survey, Candy, if you could put that link into the chat. We have, like I said, multiple choice. Click the box, closing survey. We thank you all for joining in and being consistent throughout this class. It's been quick and fast, but class, so we want to hear from you. Also, again, if you have suggestions like, hey, I wish this would have been, maybe once a week over a 4-week period. I feel like I could have gotten more out of it, or that kind of suggestions would be really helpful. We will post the videos. We're having a little bit of issues on storage and editing and other things, but I will send out the links to the videos as well. They'll hopefully be in your participant folder again coming up. So did it make it to the chat there?
Yep, it's in there.
All right, so thank you all again, and thank you for our partners. This Seed to Supper series was sponsored to you from Oregon State University Extension Service, the Oregon Food Bank, and OSU Master Gardeners, specifically Benton County and Lynn Benton Food Share. If you are interested in hearing more about Master Gardeners and learning about the training, please respond to me on the email or check out the references that are in the participant folder. Thank you guys for hanging out an extra few minutes to fill out our polls and our surveys. And thank you for our facilitators for staying on for our review here at the end. Thank you all again.
Bye.
Bye, this has been awesome.
It really was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It was excellent.
It was.
Yeah, pretty fun.
I want to thank you all for allowing me to sit in and participate. I'm kind of a lone master gardener up in my community, and I've learned a lot from being involved in this.
Good, yeah, it's awesome. Seriously, it's encouraging to have people join in and see what we're doing and be able to spread that around. We're hoping that we can make this not only the PowerPoints but the videos available for anybody to use in their community settings and spread the word. Pretty cool.
The biggest problem right now is that after the fires, they still haven't rebuilt all the systems. So even if some people put a trailer house on their burned out lot, they still might not have internet.
Oh, right, right.